First 4 matches of the day have been as close as humanly possible. We've had 5 rounds of overtime across 2 maps. The other 2 matches went to 30 rounds, 16-14s each one. None of the teams giving up at any point during these matches. G2 is his overwhelming favorites to qualify for the major, and they played pretty well in their first match. They had a couple bumps in the road, but I mean that's pretty much, you know, par for the course with them in early matches and early group stages. But those guys still just have so much skill and widely considered to have the biggest peak of all of professional Counter-Strike.
Exposed to the apartments, and he's blind. Surely there's a peak eventually coming in from Shocks.
Great position here. Oh, Bolster's waiting for the perfect moment. Strax gets himself to the third one coming easily as well, and that's a great cleanup.
Optic had a little bit more of a struggle in their matches. They're still reeling. They still haven't figured out any of the kind of the coaching in-game leader situation that they have going on with their lineup. You can see there's been a loss of confidence. There's, you know, a loss of a step here or there for them, but still you can see all the skill on display, even in a loss, that they're still going to be dangerous going forward in the tournament. Penta came into this as a massive dark horse. They've been actually kind of a sleeper pick of people to get out of this because we've seen them play very, very well in the lower echelons of Counter-Strike and in some of the lower tournaments. But coming into this, I mean, they have star players like Sunny, who's been performing very, very admirably, and he brought them to that first win. And they're looking like they're going to be very dangerous going forward.
What else did you think it was?
Oh, no, not like Madonna, but I mean, I thought his first name was Tarek. I thought that was his name.
Oh, looks like Eco will be cleaned up here, making a lot of money, a considerable amount of money on $8K now.
Even the underdogs coming into this tournament have shown that they're well prepared, that they're not giving up, they're still chasing this dream. Tai Lu was an unknown quantity in the fact that they were able to challenge a Liquid team who was one of the best in North America. It's playing very well lately, just shows they've been improving during all this time off. This is the culmination of 6 months of hard work for them. The NA teams, well, we had Team Liquid and they won double overtime over Tai Lu. They struggled a little bit, but Liquid is going to be focusing on not the scores of their wins, just getting those 3 map wins. That's all that matters, is qualifying for the major.
But smoke goes down, and that sort of prevents the trade attempt. That actually might make DD's life slightly more difficult here as he now gets onto the bomb site. And he can try to plant, but the problem is that CT could just rush him, so he's going to be very careful. He's going to fake it initially. And Brush going to smoke himself, going absolutely mental there. The spin there from DD somehow finds himself the kill. Wow, well, he's had some time to calm things down. As we have, oh, the lineup there for 8Zen. Pulls out the USP, almost gets every single player. Godsend's like the forgotten son of the Nordic region. I mean, they're a team that just has so much danger in terms of, you know, Pronax, who's one of the legendary in-game leaders of all time in Counter-Strike. A lot of skill behind them as well. And they came and showed up. It's always a question mark, but they've showed up in this first match and that they're here to compete. It's the Godsend that we want to see, the Godsend that's going to be challenging for a spot in Poland.
Second half of the day, Tengri versus Mousesports. Tengri from the CIS region versus the Mousesports European team. Obviously, a lot of you guys obviously know them. 16-1 scoreline for Mousesports tells a story on its own. You can tell that it really gets to play against the top European teams on a daily basis much. They just were overwhelmed in pretty much in all parts of the game. Even getting started on City side of Inferno. Still having to, well, struggling as much as they did, but it's just the first game for them, obviously. So that's the land jitters are out of the way, and they obviously get more opportunities to try to get some wins. And you never know, you know, they're the kind of team that have that unexpected kind of quantity that no one really knows what to expect going into the game. So they'll have their chances.
Some good fundamental Counter-Strike. It's what you need to see more of, but they still both lose their lives. And actually, I think the peak from SNK was just like 3 seconds off from spotting Dennis. They're heartless. They're just gonna hunt him down, man. This is incredibly brutal.
Hellraisers versus Vega Squadron was a game that everyone expected to be quite one-sided towards Hellraisers, obviously. Vega Squadron we've seen before at the previous major qualifier where they upset NIP. That was one of the massive things that happened in that tournament. So going to this one, between these two tournaments, we haven't really seen much of them within the top Counter-Strike scene. So first half of that game actually went to the way of Vega Squadron. Eventually Hellraiser was able to creep out of it, but still positive signs for Vegas Squad, and I think they can definitely be a problem for some of the teams in this tournament.
One smoke for Vegas Squad there. An aggression coming in, that's better from Bondic. Gets the first kill, takes down JR. Against B apartments.
Yep, Sod on the left. Lovely picture in picture. Bondic gets Kashander as well, but he lost Angel in doing so. It still gives them a 4 versus 2 to work with as he backpedals towards CT. Gets Chopper as well. Bondic looking quite good in this pistol round as Huchi going to try and walk back out. Has no clue who's firing at him and from where, excuse me. He's sure to go down, and Bondic confirms that with his 4th kill in the round.
Flipside versus Renegades was an interesting matchup. You had Asian Minor champions Renegades who finally managed to win an Asian Minor after having multiple tries at it, always faltering to Tylo. Playing against Flipside, that is basically currently they always pretty much make the majors. But we haven't seen them in a long time. They've been kind of absent from top competitive Counter-Strike. So we don't really know what to expect. We know they're a team that's always, they practice a lot, they have a very methodical approach, they game very tactical, they try to outsmart their opponents in every situation. And that was kind of the theme of the game as well. They even outsmarted themselves. In some situations where they already had an advantage, but they would still try to do a fake. I heard from Blade, their in-game leader, that there was a bit of jitters. Well, they were a little bit panicking in certain situations, which caused them to lose some silly rounds. But coming back, I think it was 4 game points that they managed to defend against and managed to make the game in an overtime and then take it. Shows that they have the resilience and still have a lot of different kind of ways to approach the game, and their tactic book is just very wide, and they're good at adapting end of the day. And the first game, you know, they got that out of the way, and again, they're one step closer to getting to another major.
The Cloud9 versus Big matchup was actually really cool on paper because Big is this tactical, you know, mastermind and Gabi, the in-game leader, that is tactical team, and that's exactly what Cloud9 is missing. But on the reverse side of it, Cloud9 has all the firepower. They have all the big star names from North America, all the big-time players that we've had over the years are all on Cloud9. So outside of tabseN, Big had no one to challenge it. But this matchup was just purely about Stewie. This was Stewie at his finest. He was in his element. He got rolling so early and it just never slowed down. Big couldn't stop him. He was doing everything we know him for, jumping through smokes, getting multi-kills left and right. He opened up rounds and he finished them off for Cloud9 and let him do a huge win.
First match of the day. It was an upset, maybe not the biggest upset we had so far, but Penta, the manner in which they defeated Team Liquid 16-3 on Mirage with a very, very strong T side, just seemed like Liquid was a bit slow to get into the game, and Penta took full advantage of it, started off with a very fast-paced play style, aggression all over the map. Liquid tried to adjust, but they were simply completely outclassed. The Optic Vega game, that was probably the biggest upset we had so far in the qualifier. Optic, of course, as a challenger team, having a slot at the major qualifier. Vega, on the other side of things, had to come through the CIS minor, so a qualified team beating a challenger team, and they managed to do so, playing the more difficult side on Train as the terrorist, being 9-6 down in the first half. Mir, the star of the team, had an amazing game, was doing a lot of work for the team. Optic, because they lost to Penta already, they had to put more emphasis there, which in turn made the outer bomb side slightly weaker, and Vega just did a great job of taking advantage of that. We had a rematch of the Asian Minor and a matchup that we saw 2 times there, Renegades versus Tyloo, and the map was Cash, which was actually the map that Renegades won both times they played it at the Minor. So you could tell that Tyloo was probably prepared for it since they let it go through, and I think you could see the impact of Peacemaker in the little time that he was with the team. We saw a couple of really good executes from Tyloo. They were looking a bit more on point tactically, and they had a very, very dominant first half on the T side. Now, switching sides, Renegades started mounting a comeback. The game was very close, very messy, a lot of clutch rounds as well, and at the very end, Tyloo did manage to win an eco round, which just gave them enough to edge out Renegades in a 16-14 game.
So the fourth game of the day was Big versus Tengri, which on paper should have been an easy conclusion. Big was obviously the favorites going into this. I have them as a team that should be one of the top 8 and actually make the major itself, and Tengri came off of an abysmal start to this tournament with a 16-1 loss. So I thought going into it, pretty straightforward. Big lost to Cloud9, 16-14 on Cobblestone, the same map they were about to play. Their CT side was the issue. They were starting on T side. Everything was there for, you know, a 16 to single-digit win over Tengri. But it didn't really prove that way. And surprisingly, Big, who's known for really good execution, showed a lot of lack of it. They didn't get smokes down. They were really sloppy on entrances. They lost a lot of the duels. Couldn't really ascertain drop room to split B. When they went A, they were going one at a time, and it looked like for a while Tengri was actually going to take control of the game. The one saving grace, though, for Big was the man who stepped up in multiple occasions, and I have to say I agree with Henry in that without Tabson, Big is a whole different team. He saved them so much in this game and really bailed Big out, because if they had gone down 0-2 in this tournament on day 2, I don't think they would recover, but now that they're in 1-1, the pool's going to level out, and there's a chance they can actually still make it through.
The Immortals Dignitas game was, on paper, one of the most exciting of the day. It was two very heavy-hitting teams, high fragging potential there. The scene was set on Cash, which was going to be a really exciting prospect for us, one of the fastest maps we have in the pool right now. It kicked off with a very exciting pistol. It was a T-side start there for Dignitas, managing to get the bomb down, and unfortunately for them, a full defuse coming in there with the 3 players surviving on the T side, which is unheard of. That really set the tone for the rest of the game. It was really disappointing for Dignitas after the first half, 13-2 in the first setting. And then we move over, and then we see somehow Immortals throwing the game. Before it was a lock-in, they'd absolutely done it. It was done. There was no chance of Dignitas coming back. But they fought back on the CT side, and Immortals actually looked pretty poor on the T side. They didn't get the bomb down once in 10 rounds. They couldn't get anything closed out. It was actually almost a comeback coming in there. Finished up 16-13. And some amazing plays from the likes of Fox, Jacob as well, but they couldn't quite get over the finish mark. It was a really exciting game with some disappointing T-halves and some bad decisions overall, but Dignitas, unfortunately for them, they're now 0-2 and they probably might not make it to the major at this point.
Hellraisers met up with Flipside, a matchup that we knew from actually a year ago at the Cologne Major qualifiers, where Flipside managed to beat Hellraisers in the deciding match to qualify for the major. They hadn't met on land since and ended up on Overpass. Both teams are pretty prominent on the map, and Flipside just showing dominance on the city side, playing very aggressive, but at the same time it was very calculated. It seemed like they had a great game plan going on, and you know, that's something you can expect from a team that Blade is a part of, that he has thought of every single thing they did. Electronic was having a great game, and yeah, it was just basically a one-team show through and throughout. One of the most highly anticipated games of the day was definitely G2 versus Cloud9. G2 obviously a team that everyone's expecting to become one of the best teams, if not the best team in the world, and Cloud9 has shown that they can still fight with the better teams. It ended up being a bit of a G2 show, even though Cloud9 mounted a comeback in the second half, but the first half was all Frenchmen, to be honest with you. They were dominating the game for the most part, hitting double digits going into the halftime. In the second half, you could see desperation in the way Cloud9 was playing. They would be sending Stewie on a mission on his own, and he'd be the one to have to do the plays. It's not something that is very sustainable in the long run. There needs to be some kind of protocol system behind your play. In the end, G2 were the victorious, and they would be moving on to be very close to making the major. For the last game of the day, we had Godsend versus Mousesports in a match where Mousesports themselves saying afterwards that they feel like they're one of the favorites in this tournament. Not sure if they exactly are, but still, I mean, more so than maybe Godsend is right now. And again, the big difference maker in the match was basically Godsend making massive mistakes on Train as a map, which is not maybe one of their comfort maps at all. They may have been surprised by the fact that it ended up on the map. Losing a 5-on-2 and a 5-on-3 situation, you just can't win like that. start things off on Saturday, we had Dignitas facing off Tengri in an elimination match, and don't think anyone's really surprised that Dignitas were the one to come out on top, but Tengri, you know, a valiant effort for them. No one was really expecting them to be going far in this qualifier, but still they showcased they have some skill individually, especially some strategies to go by, but still small little mistakes here and there mount up, and you know, they lost man advantage situations and so forth. So unfortunately they're going to be eliminated at this tournament, but then again, you know, they'll have a lot to learn from it, and we wish them the best of luck in the future.
For the second game of the day, we had Optic taking on Renegades, one of the North American teams in Optic. Renegades, an Australian team that's been playing in North America for the past year and a half or so. So this was just a well-rounded performance from Renegades. They ended up taking the match. It was also an elimination match, so it takes Optic completely out of the tournament. Well-rounded though from the Renegades side. No one really stuck out. It wasn't any kind of star play. It was just good, fundamental, basic team Counter-Strike. JKS had a couple big rounds down the stretch, but overall the story of this is going to be how the mighty have fallen. Optic was one of the best teams in North America, and they were even competing for titles just 6 months ago. It's just kind of very sad to see where they've gone, so they're eliminated from the major. Tyloo took on Vega Squadron on Inferno, and Vega Squadron ends up winning this game, which was, I think, a little bit of a surprise to many. So in some ways it's a small upset of sorts, but really the story of this is JR from Vega Squadron. His AWPing was so incredibly on point, bails them out. He wins a magnificent 1-on-4 that just seemed to crush Tyloo. Really, despite all the talent and all the promise that Tyloo shows, this really exposed some of their inexperience and some of their critical flaws in post-plant situations.
I felt pretty confident before the match against Immortals. We were pretty prepared and we kind of knew which map's gonna be. And yeah, the game plan was ready for both maps, and we knew that we needed to step up as we played the day before. But we also know that if we are good, in a good shape, that we can crush them on the map where we were prepared. If we manage to play this concentrated, we are pretty strong, I would say.
Cloud9 took on Godsent on DE Train, which is kind of an interesting thing by itself. It's a map Godsent has lost previously in a couple close matches earlier in this tournament. On top of that, I mean, just speaking of Godsent, one of their big critical flaws in this team is their map pool. They don't have a lot of different options. Favorite two maps are Mirage and Cache. Cloud9 wisely bans both of those out, so it ends up on a map that we've seen they're not exactly world beaters on. And here, once again, it just kind of showed. Cloud9 was just too strong. Guys like Stewie, guys like Automatic, those are always the names you're going to hear when Cloud9 takes a victory. They were so aggressive on the map. They controlled things perfectly. Godsent managed to claw their way back kind of into contention, but Cloud9 slowed down the pace a little bit and were able to close out that match.
Later in the day we had the Penta versus Mousesports game, a sort of a domestic rivalry in terms of organizations, both German organizations, but both teams are now international teams. And Penta, the surprise package of the tournament, started off great, like they did in some of their previous games, being up 9-0 on the T side. But Mousesports, led by Rops, did a great job of coming back into the game after that, winning 9 straight rounds of their own. And it was a very close affair up until the very end, but Mousesports did just manage to edge out Penta and qualify for the major. Liquid versus Hellraisers, it was a very one-sided game. Liquid having a very strong first half on the T side of Train, with Hellraisers winning pistols. So it looked like Hellraisers might have a good game there, but ever since the second round, Liquid just took over the game, was very dominant. Their individuals were very much on point, and it just seemed like Hellraisers were out of it. For the last game of the day, we had G2 versus Flipside, and Flipside not necessarily a surprise for this tournament, just an unknown really. We haven't seen them for a very long time, but their reputation at the major qualifiers is something that needs to be respected at this point. And G2, a team who were the favorites coming into this one with a pretty much secure spot, everyone would think, and it was a very close affair actually. G2 started off strong, Flipside as usual managed to find a way to claw back, and it was some heroics from Kenny S towards the end of the game, winning a couple of important clutches that did secure G2 that spot at the actual major, and they're definitely going to be one of the teams who can potentially win the whole thing.
Penta versus Vegas Squadron was the opening match of the final day of the PGL Major Qualifier. It was on Train, and Vegas Squadron has proven that they can be a pretty tricky opponent. They've got some good skill, but Penta just relied on that tried and true style, heavy play towards the inner bomb site, very, very grouped up, focus on trading, and eventually they ran away from the match. It was a good start, and then eventually once they just broke them, it started out with a little bit of a back and forth between the two teams, but eventually the star power, Sunny, HS, these guys stepped up, and eventually they just overran Vegas Squadron to qualify for the PGL Major. Tyloo versus Hellraisers was the first elimination match. The loser of this actually got eliminated from the qualifier. And it was on overpass, which is pretty crazy, but the cool thing was Hellraisers had come into this only getting 6 rounds in their previous 2 matches. They've looked abysmal the past 2 days, but this was a complete change in style. Tyloo was still making some of their trademark mistakes, a little bit sloppy on some of their bomb site takes, and that allowed Hellraisers to really thrive and come back. And it was a very good bounce back game for them, essentially. And they ended up taking that out and eliminating the Chinese from the qualifier. Dignitas versus Renegades was a very close affair. Not the whole way through though. It was pretty heavy offensive sides. Both teams had very, very successful terror sides on Mirage based off of mid control. But what it came down to was Rubino had great impact towards the end of the stretch. And also as the in-game leader, he made a very, very smart adjustment right at the end of the game that allowed Dignitas to finally overcome Renegades and prevent overtime.
Later in the day, Immortals end up facing Godsend. And Godsend have a terrific first half. They start off with 12-3 in their favor. And you think that's it, they're going to move on and stay in the qualifier. Instead, it's an epic comeback, coming back into it. Immortals, one of the best I've seen in major qualifier history, and now they're still in the tournament fighting. Later on, it was Cloud9 facing up against Flipside. That turned into a really interesting game. It looked like it was going to be a close one, but Cloud9 just ran away with it. They qualified for the major again, in a really superior fashion, just no doubt that they were going to make it through. Moving into one of the most exciting games of the day is Big playing against Liquid. A really anticipated matchup. Big maybe considered the underdog in this one, but they end up beating Liquid on Train and forcing Liquid into a final match to decide if they can even qualify at all. Just a big upset, and Big are sort of a clan of people who have come from all over the place and have had a hard time finding a home. They found it here, and now they're in the major.
Closing out the day in the 5th round of the Swiss matches, we had Hellraisers meeting up with Immortals, a team that has been desperately trying to get into the majors for the longest time. And today was their day. I finally made it happen, but it wasn't an easy one for sure. Hellraisers was putting up a fight, a map as Overpass, which is a very good map for both teams actually, but was a fight of 2 very aggressive, relentless teams. But it was Immortals that were able to fight their way through all the disparity, all the emotions as we could see after the game as well. It meant the world to them to be able to get to the major. Another 5th round game, probably a matchup that no one was expecting to see this far into it. Was Vegas Squadron versus Dignitas facing with each other. Dignitas full of players that have major pedigree players playing for them, and then you have Vegas Squadron coming out of the CIS minor. Obviously we've seen them before, the previous major qualifier upsetting NIP, but this was just an amazing showdown from them, to be honest with you. They just totally dismantled Dignitas on Inferno on the CT side, giving absolutely no chance whatsoever. I think it was very fitting that they started the way the tournament, the same as they ended, with very aggressive CT side and just showcasing that they have a tremendous amount of individual skill, and they truly have the skill to make their way to the major.
I think it's incredible that we've had the end of the qualifiers has ended in overtime, almost like the circle's gone complete, considering we had the first overtime on the first day, so the circle is completely closed now. I think Flipside, they just have this weird uncanny knack of getting through qualifiers, don't they? This is the 8th in a row now, so I thought Liquid would probably win that one, but I think Flipside they just never give up. I think Flipside could be a surprise package at the major. They always turn up well prepared and have good strategies, and Blade will get them into shape, but I think it's going to take a big effort for them to get out of the group stages and make the top 8 this time. I think the offline qualifier was really interesting. We had a number of teams coming in we thought were favourites, which proved to be favourites. G2, Mouse Sports, Cloud9 all got through pretty safely in the end, but I think there were some surprises, which was really pleasing to see. I think we definitely got surprised by Vegas Squadron. I think they did a great job of getting through. Even though they maybe had a favourable draw, but they definitely did well in the games that they had a fantastic win over Dignitas at the end. I think other impressive teams, Big, really thrilled for God-B and the guys. They've worked so hard over the last 6 months, and this has been their goal and their dream, and they've achieved it. So really happy for them, and great to see the young guns in Penta get through as well. I think they were the surprise of the EU minor. They only tripped up in the final, and yet they were brilliant all the way through, and I think a lot of people were underestimating them. So to see them come up big and go through relatively easily, actually, that was really good as well.